Once you have found the place that you want to make your mark, once you have reinvented into something, what do you do then? How do you then go about becoming recognized as really being one of the best people in your field?
To Olive, who knows how to stand out and keep it real.
Thanks, Dorie. I cannot wait to start reading Stand Out by Dorie Clark. She's my guest of this New York Reel episode. Dorie is recognized by Forbes as one of the 25 professional networking experts in 2015. So as I was doing my research on TED Talks, I came across a very interesting article by Dorie. That's how I found her. So she was sharing her ideas of how to book a TED Talk. And I love her podcast. She had done, I think, 50 podcasts in the last month or so when I talked to her. They're very interesting. Like you can find a podcast that will teach you how to write emails that people will open. Welcome to New York Reel. Enjoy my interview with Dorie Clark. This is New York Reel. I'm Olive. Today my guest is Dorie Clark. She's a marketing strategy consultant, a professional speaker, a frequent contributor to the Harvard Business Review, Time, Entrepreneur, World Economic Forum blog, among others. You have written 2 books, Reinventing You and Stand Out. And you are a branding expert, an expert in marketing, communication. I can't wait to speak with you. And one important detail. You are on the list of 100 must follow on Twitter list by the Huffington Post in 2013-2014. Dorie, welcome to New York Reel.
Thank you, Olive. It's great to be talking with you.
So, Dorie, what can you tell us about your 2 books? I can't wait to read it myself. And I know that Stand Out just came out 2 months ago on April 21st, if I remember correctly.
Yes. So my first book is Reinventing You, and that came out, it was really written as a result of my own experiences, because early in my career, I was laid off from my first job as a political reporter, and I had to go through a real reinvention process where I was doing a lot of things before something stuck. I had been a reporter. I was a spokesperson on a gubernatorial campaign that lost. I was a spokesperson on a presidential campaign that lost. And I also found my way into being a nonprofit executive director. I made a documentary film. I did all these things, and there were a lot of reinventions along the way. And so that prompted me to get interested in the concept of professional reinvention. So my first book was really about that. I interviewed dozens of professionals who had successfully reinvented themselves so that I could try to create a roadmap that other people could follow so that hopefully they could do that faster and easier and better than they would have otherwise. Stand Out, my new book, is in some ways a sequel, because the logical next question is, once you have found the place that you want to make your mark, once you have reinvented into something, what do you do then? How do you then go about becoming recognized as really being one of the best people in your field? And so I interviewed about 50 top experts in everything from science to technology to business to bicycle advocacy, and tried to understand what got them to the top, what that looked like, and how other people could follow that pattern as well.
So there is a pattern.
Yeah, I think so. There's not one set of instructions that literally everyone has to follow step by step, but it's more of a smorgasbord where there are a set of common tools that people use. And what I tried to do was lay that out so that people could find the one that worked best for them.
I remember listening to a podcast in which you mentioned 5 strategies, and for each one, I was taking mental notes, thinking, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. At the end, you said, even if you do one of them or start with one of them, that will make a big change. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes we get overwhelmed by this idea that we need to do everything. And, honestly, no matter what realm it is, usually you can't do everything. You probably can't be on every single social network. You have to choose, you have to prioritize. And if you are trying to build your reputation as an expert, someone who's really knowledgeable or has something to contribute in your field, you are going to be taking your eye off the ball if you're trying to pursue too many strategies. What I will suggest for people is that they pick one or two and try to go deep on them. And so very briefly, the 5 most common strategies that I identified when it came to experts developing their breakthrough ideas. Number 1 is a niche strategy, where they pick a narrow subject area and go deep in it and really develop an expert reputation, which they can then later expand. Number 2 is doing original research. And that can mean a lot of things. If you're a scientist, clearly, we know what that means with microscopes and whatever. But it could be writing case studies. It could be doing interviews. It could be doing, video interviews like this. It could be, if you're a mathematician, it could be doing a statistical analysis. But really, it's fundamentally about creating new information that enhances the dialogue in your field. That's number 2. Number 3 is mixing disciplines, finding a creative way to hack together 2 or 3 disparate elements to create something new. It's pretty fun, and you can get some really good insights that other people haven't just by blending different things. The 4th is essentially what I'll call tackling a worthy problem. You want to have, when we think about big ideas, really what this is about is picking a subject area that people actually care about. Half the battle when you're trying to make a contribution is you need to have a contribution that makes a difference, but that doesn't do you a lot of good if no one really cares that much about the place that you're making the contribution. Mm-hmm. But if you are aiming at something really worthy that people are concerned about, that has relevance to their lives, maybe it's solving the climate change problem, maybe it's curing world hunger, maybe it's not a social concern, maybe it's a business concern, but it's one that people are flummoxed by, about how do you address work-life balance issues, or how, as one woman, Rita McGrath, that I profiled in the book, attacked this problem of what do you do about the fact that disruption is becoming so much more common in the business world now? What steps do you take? If you address a problem that people care about, you're going to get a lot further, a lot faster.
It takes you out of your head too, because it's what the world needs.
Yes, exactly. And then 5th and finally, it's what I call creating a framework. And that is essentially taking your discipline, your field, and trying to look at it from a 30,000-foot view and saying, okay, what are the common principles? What's the common structure behind this? This is an extraordinarily helpful thing to do, and yet for a lot of fields, it really hasn't been done. So if you think of something like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and the 5 stages of grief, it's actually really helpful. People have been feeling grief, forever, but to understand how it is codified and how it fits together, if you're able to do something like that for your field or discipline, it is very powerful.
Because you verbalize what everyone felt, but then you actually put it into writing, or now that you can call the stages and you realize that, I am going through that.
Yeah, exactly. It gives people a new way to understand their own lives.
Yeah, that's very valuable. Thank you.
Yeah.
So a lot of people try to write books. I am curious about your writing process. Do you write every day, a little bit every day, or you would sit down and finish a big chapter?
Yeah, so I used to be a journalist, and as a result of that, I think I write in a way that has really been inculcated in me by the type of journalist that I was. I wrote for a weekly newspaper, and so what I would do...
You have deadlines.
Yeah, I had deadlines, exactly. I mean, that's pretty valuable, right? There's so many people that they always want to make it perfect, and in journalism you learn there is no perfect. done is a lot better than perfect. I mean, clearly you don't want to make egregious errors that can get your newspaper sued, but good enough is good enough. You know, you need to get the product out the door. And so what I used to like to do as a journalist, and I still do it today, is I will do all my reporting up front. I'll do all the interviews at first. Then I'll group them together and figure out how they should be organized. And then I will do the writing in a burst. So when I'm in writing mode, I usually take maybe 3 days a week, and I'll carve out a half day in my schedule and spend about 4 hours at a crack doing it. And during that time, I can actually usually get, at the low end, maybe 2,000 words done. At the high end, maybe 4,000 words done.
Wow. So that's after the research and you have everything organized.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay. Rewind to your childhood. I read that, correct me if I'm wrong, you entered college way younger. You graduated at 18?
I did,
And you got a master at 20?
Yeah.
What was your childhood like? What are your favorite games and toys?
Well, you know, my childhood, I think that the abiding memory of my childhood was my parents were older. My mom was 41 when I was born, and my dad was 52. And so I grew up around all these adults, and I didn't really know how to relate to kids that well. I mean, I did all right. Like, I wasn't like some social outcast, but I didn't really like kids that much. And so there were all these things that I wanted to do when I was young. I wanted to start a business. I wanted to vote. I especially wanted to vote. I wanted to drive. And it made me furious. I cannot even tell you
And you
how
had to
angry.
wait till 16.
Oh yeah, I was just completely apoplectic that I was not permitted to do these things. I really felt like my civil rights were being violated, and frankly, they are. I mean, children are in a really terrible position. I mean, I understand why that's the case, because most of them, you know, can't really fend for themselves. But nonetheless, in society, no one is as powerless as children are, because it's like, you know, you don't have any rights. You can't do anything. But it bothered me so much because I was a mature person and I had opinions that I wanted to exercise. I just wanted to get out of there as soon as I could, and I wanted to start doing things. And so I was able to talk my way into this program they had at Mary Baldwin College in Virginia that allowed for early college entrance. And so I did that when I was 14, and that was great. I was very, very glad to be able to sort of start my life.
Wow. So your classmates are slightly older than you.
Yeah, although, I mean, I was not the only person in this program. There were about 50 other people who are my age in the program. So we had a little bit of a cohort.
And that's so wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
So you remember when you got your driver's license or the first time you vote?
Yeah, I was really excited to do all of those things. It was great. Yeah, I took driver's ed when I was in college, and I was not that good. I think I used to worry the instructor. His name was Mr. Wright, and which he used to always like to joke about. He's like, "That's right, I am Mr. Wright." He was an interesting guy, but yeah, I would be driving out with him, and you know, he'd kind of get this panicky note, and he'd be like, you know, watch out for the traffic, and because I was doing this, you know, in Virginia, and so I'd sort of swerve to the other side, and he'd be like, oh my God, watch out for the parked cars.
They seem to all have the same voice.
Yeah, so
you're like a piece of cake. I can do it.
Yeah. So anyway, I muddled my way through it, and I did get my license, and so all has been relatively tranquil on that front.
Awesome. Okay, so do you remember I tweeted at you a few weeks ago about Periscope?
Yeah.
It's such a new, fascinating thing. I was followed by a guy one time. I turned my Periscope on. A whole community was feeding me lines what I should say to this person. He was harmless, but he was very bored and trying to keep talking.
Yeah.
And I felt like, wow, so now we're never alone. And it's like a new thing, a good thing to have. With all of the new social media platforms, what do you think is going to happen? It's 2015. In, say, 2020, in 5 years, what do you think the world is like? Everyone has a podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated because yeah, podcasts were, sort of kind of hip in an indie sense, 5 years ago or something, and then they just kind of went quiet, and then all of a sudden last year it's like the mainstream world discovered podcasts. but I do see that as definitely being a trend rather than a fad, because of in particular because of podcasts getting into cars. That's going to be a big thing. All of radio, I mean, podcasts are better than radio. I mean, they're objectively better because you are not going to miss your favorite show. I mean, we've seen on television that people are tired of appointment viewing. They don't, they have other stuff to do. They don't want to be like, oh, every Thursday night at 8 o'clock I have to be here to watch this thing. They want to watch it when they want to watch it. And I think that that's just as true in radio as it is in television. So I think that podcasts in general will be an important trend moving forward. But yeah, thinking about the future and all of the different pieces of technology and where things can go, it's really interesting, and it's hard to see exactly where things will shake out. But you hear a lot of talk in Silicon Valley. Of course they've been saying this for 5 years now, that they may be on the precipice of a bubble. It's Uber is incredibly promising. Is it $40 billion or $50 billion worth of promising? I'm not convinced of that. But, we'll see.
Okay, we'll see. We'll check in with you again.
Yeah.
By that. Okay, so there are 3 questions that I always ask my guests. And the first one is, if you can Skype, Google Hangout, or FaceTime with a 20-year-old Dorie, what would you say to her?
Yeah. So if I'm Skyping back in time, I think that I have there's many pieces of advice that you could give, right? I mean, on a really tactical level.
For you, it would be 13.
That's right. That's right.
You already graduated.
Well, one thing that from a business perspective, I do wish I had focused on more. I mean, I had one, but it's only very recent that I've really gotten super clued into the importance of building an email list. I mean, that is so much with the rise of social media. I think social media prompts a lot of people to take their eyes off the ball, because social media is nice public vanity metrics. It's great to have 100,000 Twitter followers or whatever, but that is so much less valuable than having 100,000 email subscribers, which you own the relationship with. We've seen the dismay that many people greeted it with, rightly so, that they paid a lot of money to try to, companies like, to get likes on Facebook and things like that. And then all of a sudden they have these fans and they can't reach them because Facebook has changed the algorithm.
Oh, yes.
And, so as a result of that, I think it's slapped a lot of sense into people, that they understand now that any social network, it's nice to have that connection, but you really don't own the nature of it. So I would say that focusing on building a robust email list is something that I wish that I had clued into sooner. The other thing, which is just like my current hobby horse, it really is annoying to me, is that I recently discovered that it is actually not true that you should brush right after meals. They've been telling us this like lie, basically, ever since I was a kid. It's like drilled in. It's like, oh, brush after meals. No, you should not do that, it turns out. You're, depending on what you've consumed, if you have like acidic foods or whatever, that actually weakens the enamel. And if you brush right after the meal, that's actually deleterious. What you need to do is wait like maybe 20 minutes or something, and then you can brush. But this is something that, science is changing all the time, but I read that and I'm like, really? Because no one ever issued a correction.
So the morning and night still stand.
Yeah, exactly. That's still good.
A lot of people brush their teeth after like lunch.
Right, exactly. And that's a bad move. It also, I've as I've gotten further into the world of dental health, I've read that actually, some people oh, thank you. Some people are saying that, of course, brushing is important, but it's really interesting. There's kind of a vogue in the business world now about habit formation, and sort of the goal that people talk about is, they want to make, such and such, whatever it is, a habit as much as brushing teeth. And in some ways it's like, the big public health victory of the past 100 years is that this unnatural behavior of brushing your teeth is something that really has become second nature for billions of people. We've been very successful in inculcating that as a habit. But interestingly enough, like dental professionals and stuff said that kind of if you had to choose, of course, brushing is great, but flossing is actually much more important. And that like if you had been choosing between them, that's probably the habit that we should have been inculcating instead.
Yeah, dentists are really big on that.
Yeah.
Wow. Didn't expect that to receive dental
Teeth are important, man. They're really important.
advice from Dorie. Thank you. So number 2, 4 areas of life: health, wealth, love, and happiness. You might have already touched on some. They are all important to us, and we try to balance them all. According to Tai Lopez, these are what we have to have a good life. What do you have? What suggestions or tips do you have on each one of them? Health, wealth, love, and happiness.
All right. So yes, this is my chance to pontificate, right? So okay, on health, let's start there. So what I can I'm clearly not a super authority, but I can tell you the things that I do. I don't have any scientific backing for this whatsoever, but it makes intuitive sense to me, and it has worked for me. And that is that every morning I like to start by drinking chai. Indian chai, not like from a mix, like I hand make it, and it's really good and it has tons of ginger in it. And I think this is important for 2 reasons. Number 1, having this sort of milky drink in the morning. I'm not so much of a breakfast eater usually, and so it's actually good because I feel like if I don't do that, I'll get a stomach ache. So the milk is kind of like a pseudo food, so it kind of like coats your stomach. Second of all, ginger, really good for you. It's a vasodilator. And so it's just enabling your blood vessels to kind of do their thing. And it's a great way to start the morning. So I feel like a really super gingery chai is a really healthful thing that I have implemented that I do every day. I mean, unless I'm on the road. And I really love that.
That's health. We got it covered. So try the ginger chai.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the $1 million suggestion. So what was the second category?
Wealth.
Okay, wealth. All right. So so my big wealth advice, again, purely my own experience, but I want so a couple of things that I try to live by. Number 1, I am a consultant, and as such, I have really variable income. So, I mean, some months I'll be getting tens of thousands of dollars, and some months I get 0, just depending on when clients pay and whatever. And so I am really big on avoiding debt and trying to have as much in liquid assets as possible, because you do not know what is going to come down the pike. And personally, yes, it's good to invest, and you don't want your money to be eroded by, by inflation or something like that. But the risk of that happening, to me, is a lot less bad than you getting hit and not having enough money to cover your expenses. You have to avoid debt at all costs, because the less debt you have, the more freedom you have, the more freedom of choices.
That includes loans, credit card debts.
Yeah. I try, and when I don't own a house anymore, but when I did, anytime I got a sort of pocket of extra money, I would try to pay off my mortgage. I just, make an extra payment. And, some people would say, oh, but, why would you do that? You can deduct your mortgage. You know what? I'll tell you why. Because people who have hundreds of thousands of dollars of house debt, a lot of them, a surprising number of them, lose their houses. And, this is not some random thing. Like, millions of Americans lose their houses. I don't ever want that to be me. I want to have control over my financial future, and control comes with liquidity.
Great advice. Thank you. So the next one would be, love.
Love. Okay, yeah. So I'm still single, so maybe people can take this with a grain of salt, but I'll do my best. So when it comes to love, okay, so actually I can tell you the plus side of this. Why the thing that I've learned in being single and something that I feel actually very proud of, is, so I've not necessarily succeeded in finding the right woman. However, I have very much succeeded in staying away from wrong women. And so, it has really stayed with me. It's really, really important for anyone. But I mean, I like to think, especially for successful business people or whatever, the most important choice you will ever make is who you marry. And it's just critically important. This is the person that is going to be your partner, your collaborator, your best friend for decades, hopefully. And you don't want you don't want the wrong person to be sabotaging you and blocking your chances of meeting the right person. So I've been in situations with people where I probably could have gotten married, but one of them in particular was very, very hard because I really cared about the woman a lot. But I knew that it would be a very bad move for me. I knew that it would be just really emotionally damaging, and that over time it would probably cause a lot of problems for me, for my business, for my life, because you don't want to have that kind of stress of a relationship that's not working, or where somebody is trying to tear you down in some ways. And so even if it's really hard, you have to get out of that. Otherwise you're just kind of consigning yourself to a bad future. So I think that would be my advice, is that particularly if you are ever in a situation where you're going to be making a more permanent decision. I mean, date whoever you want, sure, great. But when it comes to like getting married, you have to treat it like the most important decision you're ever going to make, because it is the most important decision you're ever going to make.
Love is not blind.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do agree. And it's like self-love too. Because a lot of people just think about loving everyone and then forgetting about themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
And happiness in general.
Yeah, happiness. So one of the pieces of advice that I've read about, this is actually a study rather than a piece of advice, but it can be conveyed as such, that I thought was really interesting and powerful, was, so Daniel Gilbert is a happiness researcher, and he quoted a study in his book, Stumbling on Happiness, that actually showed that if you're comparing head to head, what makes someone happier? A $30,000 raise or a 30-minute walk per day? Amazingly, it's the 30-minute walk. And, everyone, of course, would be like, oh, give me the money. And of course, yes, there's an asterisk on this. If you're poor and starving, yes, you really need the extra money. But once you get to what he considers a sort of American middle-class subsistence level, so I think, the number is like maybe $70,000 a year or something like that. In New York, we can probably bump that up a little bit. But, nonetheless, once you're at sort of a middle-class level of happiness, what's an extra $30,000 going to do for you? Well, okay, you can maybe save a little more for retirement. Maybe you can get a slightly nicer car. Maybe you can eat at a slightly nicer kind of restaurant. I mean, whatever. But if you take the 30-minute walk, if you do that every day, especially with a partner or something like that, or with a friend.
I love walking.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that literally on a day in, day out basis is going to keep you fit, and it's gonna just give you a break. It's going to help you de-stress. It's going to help you connect and have a stronger relationship. And so these little things, I mean, people are always looking for the sexy solution, the pharmaceutical solution, or the solution they have to pay a lot of money for, or whatever. But the amazing thing is that you can be just as happy by taking a walk. And so I try to take a lot of walks, even if I'm walking by myself. I'll just listen to a podcast, and I'll go out, and it's great.
It's like meditation.
Yeah.
It clears your mind. I love that. Thank you. So the last question would be, what is your favorite memory of New York City?
Yeah, so I moved to New York about a year ago, and I lived in New York a couple of times briefly before that, for just a couple months apiece. So I've spent some time here, but I'm a relatively new resident. So if I had to pick a favorite memory, there's a lot to choose from. I can tell you one of my favorite places in New York City. I actually really love the Harvard Club. And the reason that I love it is that I'm an introvert, and New York is very loud. Like I mean, there's lots of great stuff. Oh, it's so exciting and whatever. But the downside of that, like the flip side of that coin, is that it's really freaking loud. And you walk around. Like speaking of podcasts, you're walking around, and it's like, oh, there's like a semi truck, so you can't hear your podcast, or there's jackhammers and you can't hear your podcast. I mean, it's just
Sometimes you can rewind.
yeah. It's just, I mean, it's just you're being assaulted though. And so the Harvard Club is just this quiet place. It's in Midtown. I'll take you there sometime. Yeah, it's right in Midtown on 44th Street, and it's just such a nice, quiet place. And it's like the sort of old wood panels, and it's got like animal heads on the wall. Not that I'm down with that, but they've had them for like 100 years and whatever. Right. So it's that kind of place. But I have a lot of really happy memories there. They have talks that I like to go to. And it's just kind of for a number of years before I moved to New York, I would stay at the Harvard Club because they have kind of a hotel there that they operate. And so it was, like my place that I would experience New York from. And so when I think about places that really make me happy in this city, that's one of them.
Great. So I think that's it for our interview today. Everyone follow at Dorie Clark.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for being on New York Real. And we'll do another one again soon.
I love it. Thank you so much, Olive.
Thank you.
You're looking